Hey, good morning, everyone. We're at the Gullah House show. Um, today, today we're having a little technical difficulties, but we still gonna do our thing. The first thing I want to talk about is uh, we have our little season pro and seed tools and seed program going on in Sierra Leone. So check out our page. And here I got a young man with me today, a young man from Nices. He's from Orangeburg. He's going to be our youth director. His name is Dominique Holiday. Go ahead and talk about yourself a little bit, Dominique.
Greetings, family. My name is Dominic Holiday. I'm out of a small town called Nices, basically right, like almost in the middle of Nices and Norway, because got one road going here and one road going there. Of course, that's part of Orangeburg County, and I've been here all my life. Got deep ties and deep roots to all over Orangeburg, and yeah, my main thing is as I love to call it, gathering information and intelligence, which is what I call research, learning more about African American history and culture and connecting it back to the diaspora and Africa in general.
That's good. That's good, man. I know you do a lot of research. I know you consider yourself a geeky young man. You just told me your grandfather got your little farm out there. Y'all
Yeah.
raising goats. So how long have you been doing this?
What do you mean, in research?
Yes.
Woo, I've been doing this since I was 19 years old, because for a while I was just watching a bunch of YouTube videos and hearing a lot of untrue information. So, I had a awakening watching one of Dr. Henry Louis Gates's documentaries. And that just woke me up, and that just led me to different scholars and intellectuals. And one thing led to another. Started reading different books. And then one of my favorite things to do when I read a book is to read the sources so I can find out where they got their information from. And I just follow the jewels to the treasure chest.
So, well, I know you've been dropping some jewels. You dropping some jewels on us. You're good at what you do, and I like that. You representing the youth of Orangeburg well here, man. I know you came to see me at the library. I met your mother and your siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Good people. And I also know that you have you trace your lineage back to Yoruba man.
Yeah.
You have been how should I say it, transported to the Denmark area, I believe, Bamberg
Yes,
area.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, talk to me about well, you know his name. You got
Abram.
the name of your ancestor, so tell me about that.
Okay. 2 years, like for a while, I've been tracing my ancestry. And before I got on ancestry.com, I was just doing find a grave, since they basically have like a little almost like a little genealogical information. Like, you find that person's parents and you find out where they're buried to. So I finally joined Ancestry about 3 years ago, and I just, I started filling in the names and different hints started popping up. And, I always figured before I do an actual DNA test, let me do a paper trail. Let me see if I could find an actual African ancestor, because, I was always been interested. Like after the Civil War, you had over 1,000 formerly enslaved Africans, people born in Africa, still alive. So I always wondered, like, okay, I had an ancestor that was alive after that time. So I kept digging, and then and finally I decided to go. So okay, I'm gonna go on my grandmama's side of the family. I'm just gonna start looking, just seeing what hints I could find. And eventually I found a man, an African-born man named Abram Philo Ori. And then he had a name, and his name stuck out to me because, like, okay, that's a strange name. You don't find a name like that nowhere in the area, in the South Carolina area. So what I did was I just typed his name in randomly on Google, and I found out I had a cousin who did research and wrote a book about him back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I was like, whoa. So I read the article about him and about where the name descends from, because if I'm correct, it's like Abel Philo Ori in Yoruba language means cap of the head or something along those lines. And he named one of his sons a Yoruba name, Kola, which I believe means bring wealth into your house. So I was just fascinated about that and found out I had two ancestral uncles who founded the church. I believe it's called Kipunyan in Denmark. So
Yeah, I'm
wow.
familiar with that.
Wow. And seemed like to me he had some siblings that came along with him. So, and like I have yet to buy that book, because the book, I think there's a copy of the book in Bamberg, and I believe there's another copy at the Schomburg in Harlem.
You are absolutely correct because I've read about that man. I think he was connected to the Hightower family, I
Yes, he
believe.
was through the high towers. Yes.
And you're right when you say there's a copy of it in the Bamberg Library, and
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty well known. I know several people who know about it, and pretty much the same thing happened to me when I was tracing my own ancestry on my father's side. I was able to trace back to my four or five times grandmother, not Rosa, Sarah Page Rowe, and
Mm-hmm.
she was born in Africa, and the other person I found, the other African I found, was an enslaved African. He was born 1780 in West Africa, and that's me in 4 days. Five times great grandfather. His name was Caesar Hart, and he had about 13 or 15 sons and a few daughters, and they helped uh, populate the Cope Norway area. A lot of us happened to descend from Caesar and Sarah also, and I found several other enslaved Africans in the Cope Norway area.
As a matter of fact, me and Mance was just discussing a couple of days ago. All three of us have a common ancestor, Samba Tyler.
Yeah. He was from West Africa also. Matter of
Mm-hmm.
fact, I think the Samba name was named after a tree. It's a tree in West
A
Africa.
tree in the Gambia, I believe.
That's right. It's in the Gambia. It is in the Gambia. And yeah, you're right. You're right. Samuel Tyler. He was owned by the Jameson family, I believe. The Elizabeth Tyler Jameson family in the
Mm-hmm.
1800s. Yeah, you are absolutely right.
He was another ancestor because I was like fascinated. Like, wow, I found two African ancestors, and that's pretty big because it's hard for African Americans in general to get past that 1870 wall because that was the first time African Americans, for the most part, were included in the census. So just being able to find enslaved ancestors, an African ancestor that has something that's traceable back to a particular region in West Africa, like that was just mind blowing for me.
Yeah, same thing happened to me. Same
Yeah,
thing happened to me
yeah,
when I connected with I have two cousins that I have developed relationships with, Fatia and Bakoli, and both of them are from the same area, Mayamba and Kinema district in Sierra Leone. And
wow,
that just proved to me and showed me that that area of Sierra Leone was the hot spot. That
yeah.
was the that was the hot spot. That's where they were capturing and enslaving our ancestors to bring them over here to South Carolina, from Bunce Island to where the new
Charleston.
museum to the new museum is down there in Charleston. The
Yeah,
what I am the International African American Museum, which I'm hoping to get down there sometime in
as
August.
well.
I encourage you to go
Yeah,
also.
we were supposed to go this week passing, but it just had some things come up and started dragging tail, and man, by the time I checked again, I'm like, man, they ain't got no more like tickets or whatever, I guess, because I guess you got to book early to get some tickets and you can go in. So hey, maybe next week or whenever, but very soon before the year's over with.
Yeah. Same thing here with me. I can get the old man discount now. So my wife has been trying to get tickets for us to go down there this month.
Yeah, because it's relatively cheap. Because I think if you are a citizen of South Carolina, you get a discount as well. So hey,
Yeah.
oh,
Well, tell me this, young man. Let's go this way here. Let's go in a different direction here, real quick. How do you feel about having Gullah Geechee heritage?
it's funny you asked me that though, because I feel great about it, but then again, it was something that I kind of always knew, but just didn't know how to voice because I always figured that okay, as some people like to say up here, them people down there was just them people down there, like it was just a whole separate group of people or whatever. And for a long time, I thought about that because when I went to Boone Hall Plantation, I think this was my 7th grade year. That was the first time I ever become exposed to what people call Gullah Geechee culture. I was, I didn't pick up the signs or the similarities then, but after I started digging deep into my research or going on what I call my intellectual journey, I was like, wait a minute, hold up now. Yeah, there might be a difference in the accent and slight difference in color there since they're closer to the ocean. But other than that, a lot of the terms and words they use, we use them up here in Orangeburg, specifically in my area. Like I grew up here in Yana and Jug and what else? There's plenty of other words I grew up hearing, and then the proverbs. I'm like, wait a minute now. There's no way that the corridor is just okay. The corridor does start there. That is the essence and roots of what's called Gullah Geechee culture. I admit that, but it extends far more than just that man-made border that's been created. So
I agree with you 100%. For me, because we know that Lorenzo Dow Turner first heard the language here,
state.
right here up on State College,
Mm-hmm.
and for me, that just is the essence that make it anything. Wait, my words are coming out messed up. But anyway, I think we should have some kind of recognition for Lorenzo Dow Turner here up on State College.
Absolutely.
That should be recognized first and foremost, and that's where we began from. That's where the Geechee culture stems from. For me personally, I didn't even hear the word Geechee until I was about maybe 10 years old or something, and that was when I moved up north to New York, and them boys out there was calling me Geechee because I was fresh on the block.
Right.
He a little country boy. He from down south, and that was like the first time I heard the word Geechee.
Mm-hmm. We have a question. Cousins, can you talk? We have I believe it's pronounced Basani, if I'm correct. Can you talk about aspects of Gullah Geechee culture that were retained by living descendants in the communities in Orangeburg? I'm gonna let you start. You want to start, Mr. Gas, or?
Well, like you just said earlier, my grandmothers, both on my maternal line, that's where I first started hearing the different words like biddy, yana, coulda, which was a turtle, tote, to carry. My grandmother had a word for food, and I guess this is like a word held over from slavery days, where she would call her food, when y'all gonna bring my rations? That's what she used to tell my grandmother. That's what she called lunchtime, her rations.
Right.
And my grandma Miss May, we used to call her. Miss May she didn't have a whole lot of education, but she knew about plants and herbs and stuff. And I will tell you this: one time I fell into a poison ivy oak one time, and my grandmother, she just walked down to the edge of the woods, came back to the house, she boiled some leaves, rubbed it on my arm, and the poison ivy was gone. Now, mind you, I was going to the doctors. My aunt had took me to professional doctors and everything. The doctors here in Orangeburg County. I was here in Orangeburg County then.
Right.
And it wasn't working. I was just scratching. But Grandma May, she rubbed that salve on me. I guess you could call it a salve. And the itch went away. And another thing she would do is when it stormed, she used to take an axe and she would chunk it down into the tree stump. And I had no idea why she did that, but it was something that she did on a regular basis when it got really, really bad as far as
I've read about that. I like to read old anthropologist journal articles from like the late 1800s or whatever, and they had a journal called the Journal of American Folklore, and I think I ran past an account of a lady in Louisiana doing the same thing, using an axe when it's like heavy lightning and thunder, and then she just drop it in the ground, and then I guess I think that was it seemed like it could have been a retention of a Yoruba belief dealing with Shango.
It could very well have been. And a couple other things my grandma did was we couldn't talk. We had to cover the mirrors. We used to talk about the boo hands and the color blue. Me and my cousin Morris, we used to talk about that. And the one thing they used to say was, "Don't let the hag ride you."
Yeah, man, I grew up with that too.
And we were scared of that. And and then the other thing was, and mostly it was the women who kept the the roots conjure thing going.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I know the women in my family in the evenings, they would sit on the front porch and things like that. And they would have their little conversation. They would chase the boys off. That was more like women talk. Granddaddy now, after a hard day's work, them boys were storytellers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they were storytellers. They had their little white glass.
Mm.
you know,
Yeah, I know what they had in that glass. I
yeah,
heard. Oh.
that what they had in there. That what they had, and they were storytellers. And my grandma used to say, my grandfather had a store, and my grandmother never really wanted me to go hang out around the store because, as she would say, Mr. Bill, that was my grandfather's name. That's what they called him. Mr. Bill ain't doing nothing around that store but telling lies, and that you don't need to go around there. But I did, I hung out with my grandfather, and he was a self-made man. He didn't have a lot of education either, but he had a mind for a calculator, and he did
Mm.
all his business transactions in his mind, and you couldn't cheat him. You couldn't cheat him. He knew how to count his money, and that's what he did.
I had an
My,
uncle like that. Your grandfather was the same way as my great grandfather and my great great grandfather. Like they were men among many. Now they were two educated men, know how to read and write. But I had an uncle. I believe he was not literate, but like how you described that man there, you couldn't cheat him out no money. Couldn't
yeah.
cheat him out no money. He couldn't read, but he knew how to. He know them numbers real good.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing was the other thing is we did like everybody else when I was coming up. Everybody always come back down south because I grew up in the city. I was born here, but
Mhm.
I grew up in the city. And everybody up north, they come down home in the summer. They come down, and we did what I know other Geechee people did. They had butcherings and you know. Oh boy, there we go.
Oh, here you go.
Can,
Yo,
can you
yo,
hear us?
Can,
Clarence.
can, can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
man.
sir. Yes, sir.
I apologize, man. Technical difficulties.
Man, it's
Well,
all
brother,
good, bro.
well, brother Clarence, we are glad and excited to have you here, man, young man, and we just gonna let you jump right on into it, man. Go ahead and tell us about yourself.
All right, I've been realizing recently is a long story, so what do y'all want to hear?
I
Well,
wouldn't mind hearing everything.
yeah, man. Give us some background on how I know you've been to Africa a couple of times. I know you consider yourself Gullah Geechee. I know you down in Florida. That's Gullah country to me, and you know all the craziness that's going on down there with your governor. You talk to us about all that.
Ah,
Well, I actually don't claim Gullah Geechee now. I as an African American, I recognize the I feel like the Gullah Geechee corridor is almost like a barrier reef of the culture. Uh, um, you got some places where the people preserved so much of the culture that it's just different from other places. What I did find out was on a DNA test, they did link us because I got some people from Alabama, and so they linked us. They said, well, South Carolina and all that. So
yeah.
like that. But yeah, I I was raised by people who had kind of lived in the 60s and were kind of connected to the movement. So I was always oriented towards blackness, our roots in
Y'all go
Africa.
ahead and keep
Um,
talking. I'm gonna run to the restroom and I'll be right back.
All right.
But y'all go ahead.
okay.
All right. Keep spitting it, Clarence.
So my foundation, was pro-black, was how do black people um, improve the situation we find ourselves in. It also, they spoke to the history and all that type of stuff like that. So as I got older, I kind of just naturally moved into, what that orientation had been, as a man as opposed as a child.
Right,
Um,
right.
So I was kind of predestined, to look toward these things, but I think I jumped off into it a little bit deeper than my parents expected.
Yeah. Yeah, but every
So,
generation should do that. What one generation's interest is, the next generation should just dig deeper into it. So yeah, I think you did that, bro. You did that. You did that, man. Because the stuff you've been telling me, I'm like this dude here is like Indiana Jones, man.
it's
All right, I'm
interesting
back.
because I grew up around, at the time I didn't have no word for like, Afrocentricity, right? It was just, it was all black, right?
Yeah.
But dad would have us go to the black bookstore, buy presents, for whatever the holidays was at the black bookstore. The church had a Saturday school where they taught Swahili and African and programming in the 80s. So when I got to school, I was going through kind of an awakening and also kind of a tough time. I think sometimes maybe that goes hand in hand. And I saw the Afrocentric swag. I saw the ladies looking good in the clothes and everything. And brothers spitting knowledge, and you didn't really necessarily know what things were. So you hear somebody say some typical Rasta thing. You hear somebody speak from the 5% perspective. You just like, all right, cool, whatever. I'm getting knowledge, you learning and everything.
Yeah.
And so I go through this kind of transformation where I really kind of received a spiritual calling, toward all this. And I had been headed towards an MBA, and getting money, in business. And I crashed out of that and just wound up where the whole thing I wanted to do was study our culture, our history, really though also the traditions of human beings all around the globe. And so I became a mystic, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in our community, we had like elders. And at this point, the elders would just share with you what they had. If they was about that, they would share with you what they had. So my elder had kind of specialized in yoga, you know what I'm saying? But it wasn't, he knew all kind of stuff. So we'd be sitting in yoga class. We'd be sitting in yoga class and he'll see some child run in the room. Now he talk about the child, this is so-and-so's child. And we like, well, what is it? What are you talking about? There's no child in here. He talking about the spirit. You know what I'm saying? And so it was very common for our teacher to interact with, the ancestors, the dead, the spirit, to see them. That was very normal. And just a couple other things like that. So as I got older and it started, it was presented to me, well, why don't you go to Africa and this type of thing like that? It's just automatic. I had already kind of like, when I shifted from business school to just being in the South, I was really like, I'm from Seattle.
Right.
So this is a whole different planet.
Right.
So I'm seeing elders sitting on the porch like, I'm not just walking past, just it's normal. I'm seeing elders sitting on the porch like, what does she know? What do they know over here? So I'm literally going through the neighborhood. It's people growing, like some people growing like castor bean. I'm stopping. Oh, you grow castor? Oh, cool. Oh, okay, you growing this, you growing that. I'm having conversations with local people about how they grow the food and everything like that. Okay, well, I'll give you some seeds. I take them back. I grow it in my little garden.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm doing the research right there in the town that I live in. You know what I'm saying?
What town were you in?
I was in Tallahassee, Florida.
Tallahassee, Florida. Okay, yeah.
About 20 years.
So, wow, yeah. I heard some stories from down there. So yeah, I can imagine.
So tell us about your journey to Africa. I know you've been to Mali and Nigeria. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I was in school. I had a sister who was my professor, and she challenged me. She said, well, you ever thought about going to Africa? You talk a lot about it. You ever thought about going? I said, absolutely. And she was like, well, but why don't you go now? Something like that. And I was like, yes. And I was done. Like, so we put together like an independent study because I never had no money. I used the school money. I figured out a way to like funnel stuff and get over there. When I went right down to Mali in Senegal, I had $300 to my name. More money was on the way. I had to organize the whole thing. And yeah, I went there to study the blacksmithing tradition because I had gotten into it in school. And smithing is like, for the different African ceremonies that I had been in, African spiritual ceremonies and stuff like that, smithing for me, especially as a mystic, was like, had the energy of like a ceremony.
Right.
You're sitting there forging a piece of steel and it's glowing. But as it glows, it vibrates and you can feel it down the tongs into your hands. As you hit the forge, you can feel the reverberation of the energy back into your body. You know, sometimes I would forge like, let's say 8 hours straight or something like that. Now I go home and my body would seize up.
Yeah.
But the whole time I felt energy and I felt like I was good the whole time. You know, sometimes I would work until it was dark, and then it's dark and you're seeing this piece of glowing metal and it's vibrating, crystallizing, shining off the light. It looks like you're in space. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of magical.
Yeah, so I know that feeling.
That's what propelled me to, I was like, I got to see what the Black people, you know, how we do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Mali, I knew, was a culture that really valued the Smiths, was excited about the smithing, you know, as opposed to some cultures in Africa, they kind of, well, the Smiths aren't really the warriors, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
they kind of play them sort of like that, you know?
Yeah, I guess every culture has their values towards the blacksmiths.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So Mali has, you know, societies of smiths. They tie back to a documented, like 1,000-year-old heritage. You know, probably way more. You know, smiths run one of the highest societies of knowledge in Mali, or at least that's how it's documented as the Como Society.
Yeah,
it's a society of sorcery and inner knowledge and all that type of stuff like that. So, that was what propelled me over there. So I hit the ground. I take a bus ride from Dakar to Bamako. That was a wild.
How long is that ride?
I have no idea, but I know we got on the bus one day and we rode. I thought, you know, it's gonna be a normal bus ride like the States. We get on the road. They open the door, so the dust, you know, blowing in and everything, but it's hot. So this is the AC.
Yeah.
So, you know, we riding across and we stopping at random places out in the countryside. Don't look like it's anywhere near any kind of city. You know, police checkpoints. Everybody get off. Where's your papers? I'm trying to hide I'm from the US. I don't speak French, Bamana, Wolof, none of it.
Right.
And they think I'm Fulani, you know, so nobody really understands what's going on with me. But you know, the police can see, you know. But so anyways, we crossed and then it got to nighttime one time. I always did on the first day, and they stopped, and I was like, what's happening? And I hope to God. They opened the doors, mosquitoes coming in, you know, I'm covering up, they biting me. And eventually people was getting off. I realized that some of the men, they just got off and laid out on the road in front of the bus, just laid out. And when I finally did that, I was comfortable. And then I was like, when I woke up in the morning and it wasn't nighttime and kind of spooky, I was like, I'm in Africa.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I meant that hot breeze hit you, like, and then mosquitoes and stuff, like, I'm in Africa.
I didn't feel the heat. You know, Tallahassee is kind of in Africa in terms of heat.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's the swamp too. It's like a forest and it's wet. The moisture. I felt better on the continent. It's much more comfortable.
Really?
Where I was. Yeah.
So basically, being in the South kind of was like, Fort Knox for getting you prepared for when you get over there. Almost, would you say that?
Being in Tallahassee, Florida. Atlanta's not like that. Southern Georgia, I don't remember Southern Georgia. It's hot, but it ain't all that humidity.
And how long were you over there?
3 months.
3 months? Oh, that's a long. You can absorb a lot in that time. I would imagine you can absorb a lot in that time. I think one time, what did you make the I recall seeing you on your some of your posts about the Mandinka blades and all that. Did you learn that over there?
I got to see some. It's funny because I was trying to get out to the villages. And
Mm,
for a while, I was stuck in Bamako because I couldn't pick up the language that fast. And I mean, I couldn't, the language, the people that can translate from English to, uh, well, the people who can kind of translate and teach you are high level people in the society. You know what I'm saying? They're not necessarily like random guy he just speaks English because their Western language is French.
right.
You know what I'm saying? So I couldn't afford, to take lessons really like that. You know what I'm saying? So I had to just pick it up. Um, and anyways, I was in the capital and I made some connections in the capital and I met some Tuareg smiths and they were making like tourist blades.
Right.
Uh, but you saw the leather working, how they put it all together. I'm just absorbing it. And internally, I'm mad respectful. It's amazing. Like there's a place called Sabali Bubu, which is a neighborhood in Bamako. They have earthen houses there and everything. And I was over there, and like one time there was like a possession ceremony across now these are Muslim Islamic countries, the capital, but the way that they deal with the traditional culture is different. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole ceremony across the way. Um, so I'm with the Tuareg blacksmiths, and they are forging the blades, and I'm like, really, I want to get to the village. I'm kind of frustrated because I can't get out there, but I'm taking in the knowledge. And then years and years later, when I finally start collecting the swords and studying that, I'm like, I understand. I already know some of this stuff because I learned it with them.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
that's cool. That is very cool. Then I'm going
and that
to
was by
turn it.
accident, kind of.
Are you a martial artist?
Huh?
Are you into martial arts? I mean, what sparked your interest in the blades?
Oh, I got you. Yeah, yeah. My father did martial arts when he was a young guy. My uncles wrestled and did some martial arts. So I was raised in martial arts, and I never got to like drill down into it like I really wanted to. But martial arts has been a part of my life and mind, the whole time. So
Mm.
yeah, that's
Okay,
part.
somebody got a question here. What was the role of the Malinke blacksmiths in the Malayan military?
So I don't know completely, but I was told by my friend who was a blacksmith. Um, there's a martial art in Mali called something like Kele, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought it was something more like Kele Nikele or something like that. I thought it meant like one and one, like one on one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because Kele is one. But
Yeah.
I think somebody said Kellen was um, actually combat or something like that. So they speak fast, so I was picking it up as I could. But what I was told is that it's secret. They couldn't like just expose me to.
Right.
I've spoken to privately, whose name I don't always throw names, but a couple people privately who know some things, and
Mm-hmm.
one brother actually said I could get to it. It was something I could get to, but I didn't want to encroach on culture, particularly if it was supposed to be private. But another brother said it's probably initiatory knowledge, but that um, the blacksmiths also train in that specifically. Every family wouldn't necessarily, but certain families would. And so in this place, kind of close to Guinea, in this village, this brother said the blacksmiths do train in that specific martial art. So the impression that I've gotten in talking to somebody is that Mali had almost kind of like, the way I like to think about it is like special forces. You had the Horon, which were like the nobility. These are horse soldiers, these cavalry soldiers, right? Um,
Right.
uh, um, they fight with horses, they have spears, and you can imagine a place where everybody doesn't have horses, your capacity to put together horse soldiers, send them out to villages, they can get there quick. Even if an army comes in and attacks and then
Yeah.
withdraws, They could run out, chase down the army, and then come back. So that's a special, thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also had different groups. And so if you're training already in the martial traditions, when you rally the army, for whatever reason, some people may have more specialized skills. The Donso, for instance, as hunters, they're going to be elite because they have all the knowledge that hunters have, as well as the magical, stuff. Blacksmiths also have unique spiritual knowledge. So like you're forging, so you're constantly working. So there's medicine for strength and like fortitude, the capacity to continue long, exertion a long time. They have magical knowledge around fire, and around being cut, I think, or not being cut. Um, Different people have different knowledge though, based on what your clan is and everything like that. And then the other thing is it's another brother. I can't. Anyway, it's another brother who wrote on the Smiths in the time of Samori Touré. And what was interesting was in that time, he rallied the Smiths to replicate the European guns. So he had elite weaponry that was African produced, for his.
I read
use.
about
So the
that.
Smiths
They
had
make they produce their own guns.
Right. So the Smiths had the capacity to do a lot, and so those are their impacts, I think, on the military that I'm aware of.
Wow, that's fascinating, man. That's fascinating. I read about the Commodore. I think it's Commodores, the Hunting Society, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I wanted to ask you about, I know you got the Facebook page about the Hoodoo Corner, and I know you post a lot there. And I know you I believe you do your meditation sessions on Sundays and all that.
I do. Yeah. All right. Sorry. I'm trying to I'm trying to get this. There's a dissertation that was written on this subject. And hold on 1 second. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
No, I can't find. Oh, okay. Here we go. Yes. All right. So Anvils of Blood was the dissertation that the brother, Professor Jonathan Aiden, really informed brother, wrote on, and it covers this history of the Smiths under Samori, and also, he speaks to the Como. I get to pull from people, but if I'm in their inbox privately asking them questions, I'm not necessarily going to put them out there and say this.
Yeah, I'm like that myself.
Professor Aiden is a professor, and he wrote this, so I'm gonna say his name out. You know what I'm saying? That's a man. So that's why I learned the thing about Samori, and that's his research, and the Smiths under Samori. I wanted to say also, when you said the Kamajo, so now what's interesting is Mali was an empire, and I personally, because of how I kind of came up, Seattle is very left, so I don't personally, I wasn't raised to like empire. I wasn't raised to think about empire as something positive, and I don't necessarily. But one of the things about Mali is, because they were an empire and they spread and expanded, they rolled other ethnic groups inside of what they were doing. And while I do think that, they were slaving in certain negative things that, things that we as diasporans are going to look at as negative, there were also things that are positive in that you have a multi-ethnic kind of cultural matrix, right? People have Como that aren't Mandinka. The Sanufo have Como, a couple of different people. And I even heard there was a relationship between Poro and Como. I don't know. I read it. So when you talk about Sierra Leone, you have the Mende people. And I believe the Kamajo are connected to the Mende. But the Mende are one of the kind of branches of this great Mande family that all connect through to the history of the Mali Empire. And the truth be told, the Mandinka were part of the Ghana Empire. So when we think about these people, we're really thinking about probably thousands of years of history. I have to go back and look to when Ghana started. But when the Cises come and Ghana is established and formulated, a lot of people are tied up in that. So even
Yeah.
Soso is coming out of Ghana. The Mandinka have been, I think they were oppressed in that empire, and then they become powerful later. But even the Songhai are connected to Ghana. So we're really talking about a much longer span of time where this cast of families, you have certain families that rise to the surface and the power, and then others rise, and the people change names, and they be
Yeah.
having some of this, they descendants from some of the same clan names.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah, Brother Mance was telling me about that. But Ghana, I believe it was known as the Wagadu Empire. Am I correct?
Wagadu, right? Yeah.
Wagadu. Yes. I
Right.
think,
Those
yeah, I
names,
think they did
those
come
names
first.
just throw you, right? Because the people
Mm-hmm.
of Ghana were the Soninke, the ruling people of Ghana were the Soninke, but they're also
Mm-hmm.
called the Sorai. And so
Yeah.
somebody was telling me that Songhai is coming from that kind of, that Sorai, Songhai is coming from that kind of terminology.
Right.
So if I had known that before, I would have made the link between those two groups. Or even that Soso, the empire of Sumanguru, was founded by some Jaraso, which were smiths from Wagadu.
Mm-hmm.
The Jara being part of that name.
Yeah.
So this Jara family, Jata, Sunjata, his mother was, I think it was a Kone. Don't let me butcher it because I'm not, I don't have the history locked down. But somebody
Mm-hmm.
was tying that to the Jatas too. So the founders of Soso and I guess Sunjata, they both having this Jara
Yeah.
origin. So anyway, I'm sorry. I got off. I just wanted to tie that with the Kamajo because those were some of the first. That was where I first learned about the hunting societies based on the
Right.
Sierra Leone Civil War and the Kamajo relevance there. And I wanted to do a Fulbright, so I was kind of preparing my research so I could go back and do more. But I couldn't because of where Sierra Leone was at the time. And so I
Mm-hmm.
traced back the origins of what I read, what I was reading, were the origins of the hunting societies in Sierra Leone. And that's when they pointed me to Mali and Mandan, the Mali Empire. And that's where I got plugged into the Donso. And then also the Numu, which are the blacksmiths there. So I
Right.
got a little.
We
Okay.
have a question. Brother Bibb says, our buddy, we in the same Roots Renaissance thing with, if you can speak on your time on the show Forged in Fire. I want to hear this too.
All right. So Forged in Fire was kind of a culminating moment for my smithing experience because it happened later after I had been to Africa. I don't remember whether it happened after Nigeria. Anyways, so the television shows started seeing me. My buddy was like giving me some social media insight. So I started, he's like, oh, you got to get over here, you got to get there. So I got visible in a couple of different places I hadn't been, and then the television show started contacting me. And so Forge and Fire contacted me, and I got the opportunity to participate there once. And that's a show where they they forge knives or swords in some ridiculous amount of time that we don't usually do.
Yeah.
And you compete and see who wins. It's like not what we do, but you know what I'm saying, for the show it's like something different, And the first one I was on, I forged this, with a pretty nice looking blade to me, you know what I'm saying? And I immediately got disqualified for what they said were cracks in the blade. I was like, I didn't really see it, but these people know more than me. But they immediately were like, yo, we want you back. And so I got to be on there a second time. And I competed and I did pretty well. I got to the finals. I got to make a sword. In that case, it was a Viking sword. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man, that's dope, man. That's dope, man.
And I use what I learned in Mali. You know what I'm saying? Because like everything went wrong for that. I had a guy that was supposed to allow me to use a power hammer, which is a big, huge instrument that you can use to forge your blade out. But I didn't have that, so I had to use a big sledge. My hands were cut up because I had calluses I had the whatever you call them that had bust. So my hands were raw. So I'm foraging, and it was rough. but I actually needed a forge that was wide enough to heat a whole sword in, so I could do the
Yeah.
heat treat. Um, Steel is crystalline in nature. So
Hmm.
when you heat it up and then cool it down quickly, you freeze the crystals in a certain type of configuration, which makes the blade harder and then sharper. But if you leave it in that state, it makes it brittle. So it's not a flex. You want to balance. So you got to heat it all up all at once, put it in a coolant, which is basically water or oil.
Hmm.
And it has to be the right one. And then you can kind of temper it back down. So I was able to improvise one in the earth because of what I learned in Mali. Made
Yeah.
one out of clay and everything like that. So I
Yeah.
use
This
my
is
little
how you
African
describe
tools.
it. Like, you know, the science behind the heating and the cooling and stuff. Like, yeah, you learned a lot. You was paying attention to those blacksmiths in Mali, and you was applying that to the show. So I think that's cool, man.
It's everywhere though. I learned a lot from people here too. I
Right.
mean, I learned a lot from people here, but it's like, yeah, and I went to Mali to just soak up everything I could, and that's why I learned a bunch of stuff that wasn't directly necessarily related to what you would think about as typical smithing, but
Hmm.
you couldn't do nothing but to absorb it. They sitting there, their anvil is like this big,
Yeah, I've seen
so they
videos of
sitting
it.
there. That
Yeah.
might be overstating it. So they're sitting there forging out all the things that they're forging with a hammer right there on the edge of this little tiny anvil, and I'm dropping the tongs, looking real amateur, and I'm like, no, I'm trying to like let them know, like, no, I can do it. I'm dropping it because I usually use a different set of tools for that. They working in sandals. You on the ground instead of standing up. You working
Hmm.
the fire with sandals. This fire that can melt steel is popping on your toes.
Woo! Yeah, I know what it's like because, like, help my grandfather in the shop, sharpen blades and stuff, and the sparks of fire hitting you. So yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yes, sir. Yeah,
yeah, man.
sparks. Yeah. You
Hey,
take
so
baths with them.
we got another question for you here. How do you feel African spirituality and hoodoo can aid our fight for freedom?
What up,
Check
Krista?
it out.
This is my sister from Tallahassee is a community. We all stayed. We was young together. We was poor together. We grew up, kind of came up together in a lot of ways. So we
Hmm.
peoples, even everybody that moved and all over the place now. Um, so we are African spirituality is my norm. That's what most of everybody around me that's close to me are traditionalists, in some shape or form or fashion. So it's a slightly different question for me because it is what we're already doing, and we still see a lot of breakup of family, a lot of ineffective, a lot of the hopes we had as kids. I don't see it materializing yet. Um, I think that the most critical thing about African spirituality is it opens up the imagination. Um, Africa opens up the Black imagination and gets it out of the locked in place where um, we have a very narrow set of possibilities for our lives. So
Yeah.
you either are for a lot of people, particularly if you're in poverty, you are a street dude, uh, or you're like a corporate dude. You find a way to go through school and get money and work in corporate America. That's it though. You know what I'm saying? And then some people are
Mhm.
like, well, maybe you could be a rapper or something. Um, we don't imagine, we don't have a great imagination. You look at the shows. I mean, how many shows do you see the sorcerer, blacksmith, kings, of some planet, where it's
Yeah.
mixed with the African heritage and the fiction. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Like
Um,
Afrofuturism almost.
right. So a lot of our imagination, even when you listen to the rap songs, even when you look at the movies we make, it's like this kind of realism, this sort of like negative. You know what I'm saying? It's
Hmm.
it's always
Hmm.
like constantly the same thing. Even when
Yeah.
it's innovative, it's like the same story over and over and over again. So for
Yeah.
me, and then you get people who are creative. Well, they watch anime, so let me see how I can, or they start, it's some other thing that comes from another culture. So I feel like African spiritual. Like I remember being in DC at Sankofa conference and being in a cone. And I feel like I might be tripping, but I feel like there was the lights felt like it was low. The lights coming in from outside. I feel like there's like smoke in my mind wafting
Yeah.
through the space. There's drumming. There's these songs piercing coming through the air. There's this lineup of people over here who are these initiated or komfo, and they're coming out and they're calling down, the spirit, and they're dancing. And then, it would be so impactful that people in the audience that's watching it is catching the spirit, and it's crazy. Like it's epic and it's beautiful and it's fully an African thing. um I felt like at the time I was like, y'all, I feel like I'm in Kumasi. There's nothing logical to make any kind of association with Kumasi. It's not even a part of Africa that I really focus on. There was no reason to feel that way, but I felt like I was like back in time and I was in Kumasi, and I was like, and I had a whole possession experience, and in this particular memory that I'm having, and in this space, it's like it completely transports you.
Right.
And I think for all of us that went through those things, when it could really get to the depth and didn't get stuck in the politics and the status and the social, all the little stuff that it gets stuck in, um, you know, uh, it had that transformative power for me, certainly on imagination. What I could conceptualize as my particular future, how I imagine, it centered me, in blackness, and being able to imagine a black world that's something different from the same unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
hoodoo, though, I want to speak of hoodoo specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Hoodoo is important because for all of those of us that look to African traditional spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
some of us have kind of taken this circle, and life is, a lot of times, life is spiral, right? We go through these
Mm-hmm.
circles and
Mm-hmm.
elevate, and you know what I'm saying? It's not just one direction. So we've gone out, we've seen Africa and kind of disconnected from just the African American narrative. We've understood various different parts about the culture that we could value. You know what I'm saying? The different
Yeah.
gods, the different traditions, sacrifice, the different medicines, the magic, all of the rich cultural heritage that's there. And then we've looked back at our families, and we've looked back at the South. Now it's not just Ife. You know what I'm saying? It's not just, I mean, nobody's on Congo, but for me, because Mandinka, it's not just Kangaba
Yeah.
and, you know what I'm saying, and these amazing places, or the Congo, it's like, it's South Carolina. You know what I'm saying? It's Alabama. Where your people
Yeah.
from? You know,
Mm.
so in the Hoodoo group, there's a lot of questions that constantly come out where people are saying, well, how do I connect to this in my culture and my heritage? Because now Black people, rather than being ashamed of African heritage and the African spirituality and the magic, because that's what people are often drawn to, but also for people that really are getting it, the culture, they're saying, well, how do I connect? And so my constant commentary, as I've heard other people say, where your people from? Before they
Yeah.
moved out of the South. Oh, okay, well, my people from Mississippi, or okay, my people from Virginia or North Carolina or whatever. And then we look in there, and are we seeing masquerading traditions? There was a Black Christmas that had incorporated a whole masquerading tradition during slavery, where they're playing,
Mm-hmm.
they're playing bones, as a musical
Number
instrument. They got their
boxes,
own drums.
triangles. Yeah.
They, you know, and it's a whole African flavored thing that we didn't even know we had. So, Alabama, you look at the people down in G's Bend where they're quilting and everything like that, and they have all these old traditional carryovers from the old way, right? You can go down there and find culture, but you can also find spirituality if you know to ask. And they'll
Yep.
tell you about it because they're old people. They care about that. The Gullah, I got to go and meet Mama Bailey, Cornelia Bailey, I think is her name.
Bailey,
yeah. Before she passed on Sapelo, and I had just come back from Mali, and it didn't take very long, and she's launching off into this spirituality, and she's telling me stuff I just seen in Mali.
She made that connection.
Yeah.
Because her ancestor was, I forget the name, Bilal. Who would have come from the same cultural. I mean, I think it was Fulani or something like that, but he would have come from that same cultural mix, because even though the Fulani are their own ethnic group, you know, like I had a knife that I was holding, and you know, they have the beautiful leather work and everything like that. And one brother was like, "Oh, that's Fulani work." I was like, you know, he's a Mandinka guy. I was like, "Oh, I thought this was Mandinka." He's like, "Yeah, it is. And Fulani made it for a Mandinka man." And I was like, "Oh, okay." You know,
we can tell. We know it.
They roll like that. That's the interplay.
Yeah.
So when we hear about Muslims in early America, and they memorize the Quran, my mind immediately goes to Juju, Gregory. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking about what Islam was in West Africa, not Arabs, you know what I'm saying? Which is, you know, salute to them. But I'm saying what the black version of that was for me is intricately tied to the Gregory and the medicines that people are wearing all over West Africa. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a different shift, though, because it's the blackness inside of the subject matter. So Voodoo allows us to re-envision our own South, which a lot of people are ashamed of. Now, when people talk slower, you want to know why. Now, when people are still farmers, you want to know what they know.
Yeah.
You want to go to grandma for what herbs she knows, what old time thing, as opposed to the generation that was trying to move away from that and it was ashamed of that.
Coming back to it. Yes.
So it presents an opportunity for Sankofa that is uniquely powerful, because we can get to these places, and it's that we haven't created a infrastructure. We haven't created this massive economic piece, a financial piece around it, where it's thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars here, hundreds of dollars here, thousands of dollars to get access. I mean, yeah, people will charge you for sure. Now, root workers been asking for some bread, depending on which ones they are, but we're not just talking about just going to the root worker to get this and get that. We're talking about pursuing knowledge, and that's all over the place. Knowledge is in the food. You know, we used to cook possum, for instance. You know, people don't know about that. They have whole recipes for that. Yeah, but I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. Okay, so
go ahead, you on camera.
There are certain animals there's certain animals that we use in the work.
Yeah.
You mean in your blacksmithing work?
No, in hoodoo.
Hoodoo. Okay.
Yeah. Rabbit split is one of them.
There's certain animals that you use, right? So now what we eat becomes deeper, because you know what I'm saying? These same animals, these same bones go in the divination system.
Yeah.
So now instead of just recipes and this is something to feel soul food, people, you know, have an issue with it. No, this is part of the spiritual tradition. See, voodoo has been kind of stripped out of Black culture, and it's taken as magic and folk magic over here, rather than understanding fully, you know, them people that was doing hoodoo was still in church, where they have ability to contact spirits. Well, you know, I wonder if it's shaped by them going to church every Sunday, contacting the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. I ain't gonna speak on
it. Maybe their ability to see is tied to their constant relationship with God.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we stripped it out of the culture. So it gives us an opportunity to return to our culture and the South, where our culture is held in a different type of a way, and the people, and reconnect to the Africa that's still here in the States.
Okay. We got one more question here. We got another question here. Can an individual that doesn't come from a hoodoo family or cultural lineage become a hoodoo practitioner?
So I want to say this too. Like, I talk a lot about hoodoo, but I started doing that because there are kids out here that are being told wrong. Hoodoo had kind of been colonized online by people who were not black, and they had completely changed the narrative. At least it was a narrative that I didn't like, but a lot of black people didn't like it either. It wasn't
Right,
reflective of us. Um,
right,
and so, and then it also basically it proclaimed hoodoo dead. Now y'all from the South.
yeah,
So y'all know how crazy this is, but everybody's not from the South.
Yeah.
So they literally don't know. So even a lot of these people that are trying to come back to hoodoo, they got a grandma that they, well, some of them young, so they probably had to go to great grandma.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
right, right.
It's getting rough out here, you know.
Yeah,
But
it's getting younger and younger.
but they got people that they could talk to. They are Christian, so then I could talk to me about hoodoo, and I'm like, that's the confusion that we got. You know what I mean? So I was going somewhere with this. So I'm sorry. So the narrative I feel like has been shifted. Um, so I think a great narrative. I'm not sure how old it is. I'm not sure whether this is somewhat revisionist, but the narrative that I like when we're looking at hoodoo is that we're looking at Black culture. We are looking into the food ways. You know, at least I know in African tradition, they always feeding the gods some traditional food. So now if we
Mm.
feed our ancestors, what are we feeding them? Are
Traditional
we
food.
feeding them pizza?
Cheeseburgers, fries. I know.
Or are we feeding them what they cook? And now if we're going back to the older ancestors because the older ancestors knew what they knew, are we going back to older food ways? And like I said, if we're going back to older food ways, then we're dealing with different animals. Would these different animals have different, you know what I'm saying? You know,
Mm-hmm.
are we looking at, so to me, when you're talking about like hoodoo families, I think you might be talking about like root workers. I don't know, or families that preserved hoodoo. But I feel like a lot of families in the rural South more likely preserve the older culture. But I just personally want to view hoodoo less as folk magic and more
Mm-hmm.
so as the roots of Black culture, the African roots of Black culture. And in that way, it's everywhere. Everyone has some of the culture in their family. And whether however you define hoodoo, even if you only want to see it as folk magic, which I think is very reductive and problematic, um, the cultural context is everything. And the
Mm-hmm.
cultural context we all have if you just take the time to go out and look for it. I remember in
Yep.
Tallahassee, you know, you used to always see old people walking down the street. They going for their walk, you know, they getting their exercise on. And they always
Mm-hmm.
had these sticks, big stout sticks. I never
Yep.
seen that in up north. And they say, oh, well, the sticks keep a dog away. And I'm like, well, a gun keep a dog.
Look, I know about them sticks because I got a
Yeah,
stick just like that.
yeah. My
Why
grandma
are
used
y'all
to walk
carrying
with her
around
stick.
sticks?
Yeah,
What's
we
why?
do that.
Yeah, my
Why
grandmother
we
used to
were
walk with her stick
Africans?
to the
So,
mailbox.
I'm sorry.
I was saying that my grandmother, when she was living, I was telling Dominique earlier, my grandmother used to always walk with a big, huge stick when she would go to the mailbox because the mailbox was down the road from our
Yeah.
house. So she always made sure. She said it was for the dogs, but it was also in case she ran across a snake or something. But she
Yeah.
always
Right.
had her stick with her.
Right. And I was even told people, now tell me this. If I were to put anybody in this room and say, I'm gonna put you in a room with a dog and you're gonna have a stick to defend yourself, would you be like, oh, I feel good about that?
Oh,
I
I
mean,
don't
the
know.
way I was raised, we carried that stick. Matter of fact, I got a stick right outside, right by my door. Like,
Okay, so you would be good with the stick and the dog.
oh
Most
yeah.
of us would not, bro. We're not. And but so then now, why do you know how to use a stick efficiently enough to fight off a dog?
Ancestral memory. I learned it from my grandpa people and
That's
my aunt.
culture and that's martial capacity with sticks.
Mm-hmm.
African stick fighting is everywhere in Africa. So these are things that I'm seeing that people are not, they're not thinking about that as hoodoo. But for me, I'm in the South, they cutting, they got big long river cane poles that they, and this ain't necessarily just black, this is just, you know, old time, but
Southerners
they
in
got
general.
river cane poles that they fishing with. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, river cane grows over there. So rather
Mm-hmm.
than, you know, the expense of having to buy it, no, they just, so this whole kind of older way of life for me, I see that all over. I go talk to the black farmers and they done got deep. One man he's talking about, I was talking about, you know, managing the land, which way the road should go. And he was like, well, you really have to know where you're situated in the land. And it was just like, I was like, and my mind never left that spot. I'm sure he was talking about it at a certain place, but I was like, damn, where you're situated in the land, you know, the depth of that, you know, it's because basically he's talking about when the water runs down, do you want to catch it or let it flow through? So you need to know where you're positioned, you know. But then people also told me about different plants and the old plants that you use to brush your teeth. People are not thinking about this as hoodoo, but this is the context of the hoodoos. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Another one too that you consider hoodoo is simply how people used to get their ears pierced back in the day. They would use a broomstick straw, if I'm correct, burn it, pull it through the earlobe, and that's how it would pierce their ears. Like I've heard plenty of talk about that.
Oh wow.
Yeah. People used to do that. I've seen people do that. Even when I was in the military, they used to take a bobby pin and burn it, and push it through your ear. That's how I did mine right here. I don't wear earring no more, but that's how I got it years ago.
Okay.
Brandon made a statement here. Brandon says when you take the culture out of it, everybody feels like it's up for grabs by anyone. How do you feel about that?
I think that's precisely what they were doing. These non-black hoodoos online, non-black hoodoos. I think that what they were doing, because we weren't really online like that in the hoodoo groups, was they started comparing it to their culture. Oh wow, you look at the similarities to Roma culture. Look at the similarities to Italian folk stuff. Oh, this is kind of like, you know, this in Europe and that in Europe. And I mean, I'm not really necessarily mad at them having that conversation. You know, they always talked about Appalachia as one of the regions of hoodoo. And recently, a sister was like, "Now this was this is an internet misinformation thing going on. Somebody had passed around an image of a plate from Appalachia, and she was like, this is not our culture." And I was like, oh my God, you know, because you can look at the food ways and you can look at some of the things and like, it was an interesting point to be made because it's not we're just online. It's not a fully deeply accurate statement, but it highlighted, it made an important distinction that though these people are rural, this is not necessarily the exact same culture. Some of these rural traditions come out of Europe. So I think everybody did, you know, push. I think those people pushed the connection to Europe because they're European. They missed. So it also became there's some relationships that European people of European descent have with Black people, that whether they are intentionally anti-Black or whether they're just being themselves, they don't always recognize when they flare up. So there's this tradition of slumming, where Europeans come to Black areas to engage in vice. This is historic. I don't know how much this goes on, but it's a tradition. They come to Black areas to engage in vice and then leave. So one of the things I noticed, a lot of people don't think about this stuff at this point in time. Young people, they wouldn't know what this is, but they could get away with it in the Black neighborhood where they couldn't get away with it in their own neighborhoods. So I saw them using hoodoo. You got a lot of Wiccans who have a rule against doing aggressive magic, but they come to hoodoo and they say, "Oh, I want to cast a spell on this. I want to do that." And and I'm like, hoodoo sure has a lot of like nonsense in it. Like, why? You know, I guess it's just old age ratchetry. Like I don't know what's
I like that old age ratchet.
You know, I'm trying to figure it out, and I think that there's a lot of pragmatism. But at the same point, I'm like, these people with grandmas, we Which black grandma you know condones ratchetry?
Not too many, not in my area. Oh no,
not the way I came up. No, the old grandmamas they wasn't playing that.
My grandma was
values. They're the pillars of values. So if this is something that they're preserving, why, when it comes to hoodoo, is it all about harming whoever, doing whatever? And that's when I realized that it was likely that the historical documentation that had been done by Hyatt, Middleton, and different people was probably decontextualized. So we got to we got work for this, we got work for that. But why? What's the context? Why would you be doing harmful work? And then as people start to weigh in and say, well, the reason why people were trying to keep men was because they were trying to keep them from getting sold away on the plantation.
Yeah.
This is some of the commentary that people offered. And I was like, well, that's a lot different. That's a different keep a husband. You trying to keep them from, you know, and the reason why we're doing harm is because we are trying to stop the evil people who are trying to kill and terrorize us.
Yeah.
We're using it as something to fight back.
You know,
yeah. Then it's contextualized. So rather than just stuff being thrown out, decontextualized and everything like that, you know, so yeah. So I think when you remove the black people from hoodoo, and specifically when you remove the Southern black people, you could be from anywhere, but the people who never stopped using this stuff, who never stopped working roots, when you remove them from the conversation, you have something different, even if it's only black people.
Yeah.
And that's part of an issue I see what's going on online. But then when you remove the black people from the conversation, now we got to ask, is it even hoodoo? Because what really is hoodoo? What really is hoodoo?
It's no, if I'm like this, if there ain't no black people in the conversation, it's no do to me. That ain't hoodoo, that's no do.
Because what are we doing? Plants and animals and stuff exist in nature.
Yeah.
Does that make hoodoo that just you have plants? Can you go to just run to a tree and be like, help? Is that what makes hoodoo? Or is it the people?
It's more so the people.
It's the people who make
living and dead.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what you're doing. You're connecting to your ancestors.
And my understanding of God came from my parents, and it came from their parents. Wasn't schooled in Christianity from a white minister. I was schooled from the people in my community. And that's the same understanding of God I still have. I mean, with things I learned more and things shifted, and you know what I'm saying? But the essence of that connection that comes from them.
Yeah.
So yeah, what is hoodoo if it's not your relationship with your people?
With your people, with community and the land itself. Because the land plays a big role in how things are being conducted. That's all. I'm not going to speak too heavily into it, but I done heard some talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. But it's the relationship to the land is the relationship your people have, and you have to the land. You know, I was thinking the other day, like if all the black people in Africa left and went to China, and Africa was full of Chinese people, we might still care about the land of Africa because of the heritage. But Africa, in a lot of ways, is a people.
Yeah.
It's not just land by itself, you know. So the land, you know, our historic relationships with the land is what builds the depth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, you're right.
So yeah, I think hoodoo is us, and actually it's a sister named Mama Mina who presented that to me. I've thought about this, but I think she presented it in a specific way. I want to give credit to that because she was like, "We hoodoo," you know, and I want to throw that out.
We the magic.
She said probably first to me.
Yeah, I like that. We the hoodoo, we the magic. Yeah, we are the ones who give it meaning. We are the ones who give it meaning.
Okay, brother, we getting near the end of our time, but what does the future hold for Brother Clarence? What I know you're raising your daughters in the culture, and what's the future? I like the way what you're doing with your daughters. I saw you this morning. Did y'all go to she was trying to play an instrument or something?
We had some friends that we was finally able to link up with had invited us out to their friends kind of family farm, and they had like a community day, and they had brought a brother doing capoeira, and so that was a Birnbau, and he was teaching her how to play, as a capoeira is a Brazilian martial art and everything.
Right.
So she was kind of getting to learn what that was about. Yeah, for me, what I'd really like to do is kind of organize a calendar for my girls, so that when the G's been people holding a outdooring of the quilts festival, we go in there. Maybe we catch the people doing it revised, renewed John Canoe out in North Carolina. We get out to South Carolina and get involved in some of the Gullah events and things that you occasionally see, and to get them in around the year in the culture directly. I got them in the African dance and little stuff like that, but I want more. And eventually I need to go back to Africa. I need to continue pursuing the knowledge over there. I want to join some traditions more directly. With my people that's in Sierra Leone, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well,
I got people in Sierra Leone. Like we have family, my daughters have family on their mother's side in Sierra Leone. I got one of my best friends, her people in Sierra Leone. Y'all people in Sierra Leone. So Sierra Leone is a place to be.
Yeah, that's the place to be. We find cousins there. Full day is over there, and if you can, when you get to Sierra Leone, connect with Foday. He'd be glad.
That's definitely gonna happen.
Yeah, do that.
And let me throw this out there too. So that one of the last things I want to say is, I think this movement toward our culture is not just me. It's a broader movement. And there was a young brother. He's a young genius. Brother named Dominique.
Dominique.
This brother is brilliant. His amount of research, his organization of his research as a young man, his ability to recall it is ridiculous. And this is from a person that basically, the amount of research I do is crazy. It's not normal. It's overly. I could easily have been a professor if that was, the direction. Well, and had been successful. That was my interest. This brother is different though. He puts me to shame, and I've spent my whole life doing this. And he coined this term roots renaissance.
Yes, he did. He did.
Hashtag roots renaissance. So this concept is that there is an awakening of people returning to these roots. And in this era, we're faced with a really interesting thing because we're online now. We have this opportunity to connect with somebody in Niger who can bring us up to date on the newest knowledge. You got traditionalists in Mali over there doing sacrifice and practicing the traditions of Sunjata Keita and Sumanguru Kante and all these people. And people around the world, South Africa, are in the Hoodoo group watching us talk about Hoodoo. And so the brother Abib and Dominique and myself, we have formulated like a collective of minds around this concept that the brother coined, the Roots Renaissance. And we're creating, content, putting out stuff. You see me kind of pushing out content. Did you know about this unknown history, that unknown history? And we're trying to figure out, how do we get this high level content to the people? The brother Abib Rodney, his whole thing is crazy too. This brother's a descendant of Maroons. Y'all had him on the show. This brother's a descendant of Maroons and royal African families and royal Maroon. He got history that you don't even know exists.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and it's all he be telling me on the low, like, oh yeah, this is my history, and this is I don't want to be bragging. I'm like, bro, like your whole Black history, like mythology.
Yeah.
Famous Rasta parents. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's telling me, well, did you know that the Rasta movement was connected to the Maroons in this way and that way? And you know what I mean? And so, and he's a visionary. He worked in the movie industry. He's a drone pilot, photographer, cinematographer, and businessman.
Yeah, man.
So he pulls this thing together that we've kind of been talking about for a while. So we're putting our minds together under this brand, Roots Renaissance. And we're going to put out more and more content. We're going to pull in more and more people and see that if we can project this content to everyone, so that rather than just the historians or the academics having this like we've always had, because a lot of this ain't new. People have always known some bit of this throughout our history. We can see if we can project it to everybody so they can get bits and pieces and dig and find more. So Roots Renaissance, I want to throw that out there, let everybody know.
That's wonderful, man. I'm glad you shouted out the brothers, Dominique, Abi, several other brothers, man. I'm glad you did that. And we want to thank you for being on the show. Yeah. We try to do our thing in our own little way. But man, we want to thank you for being on, man. It was wonderful. It was great.
Yeah.
We want to shout out to Dominique because he's gonna be coming on with us more in the future. And man, I'm just glad we had this time together, man. It was a wonderful show. Thank you for coming.
I appreciate y'all platform.
All right.
Y'all the greatest.
Anything you want to say, Dominique?
Me and Clarence be chopping up later on, so you know.
Okay.
And Mr. Gas, me and you probably chopping it later on too. So hey.
Yeah. You know, we do our thing all throughout the day, man. That's what we do. It's just what we do.
Yeah.
But thank y'all for being on the show, man. It was great.
All right, man. Y'all be easy. One love.